and it had fallen to the eldest daughter to tell him this. He would want to know, the other three of his children said with certainty, and he'd want to hear it from you, and then they went back to their lives. She would take him out in the boat, she thought, on the river. She would row. He could lean back and watch the sky, watch the clouds slip around in it like afterthoughts. Never the same cloud twice. Soft craters, calm bombs, floating, dispersing, reanimating and reforming. Surely this was the place to do it. Here the news would seem less personal, cosmic news, a part of the cycle of this life. There in the boat with his eldest daughter, his hand in hers. "You're going to die," she would say, and he would nod, staring up into the blue inevitability of the sky. But that morning when she picked him up, he looked fantastic. His hair was combed, and there was color in his cheeks. He was wearing a cap and a tweed jacket, like some father out of a Russian fairy tale, not like her father. She found herself peering around him, as if for the ragged old man she'd expected, and glimpsed the little foreign nurse's aide slipping out of his room like a ripple or a giggle, wearing white. The aide's name was something decorated with accent marks and vowels that made the opposite of the sound they ordinarily made, as if the name had been conceived as a way to shame her own plain name, Jane. When that aide had to speak to Jane, she called her Mrs., although Jane had never married. Jane's father had a handkerchief folded into an arrowhead in his pocket this morning. Had the aide done this for him? It was embroidered with initials Jane didn't recognize, not his own initials. His pants looked pressed. Perhaps he'd put on a bit of weight. He called goodbye to his aide, who called back to him in a language Jane didn't speak, and her father didn't speak, but which he seemed to understand. "You're going to die." "Daddy," Jane said, "you're going to be too hot in that jacket. You should leave it in the car." He looked at her blankly, and then he shrugged, as if he were the tracks shrugging off the train, as if he were the hero of a tale shrugging off his fate. He kept the jacket. Jane started the car and drove in the direction of the canoe livery, listening to her car's little alarm bell chime the whole way because her father wouldn't buckle his seatbelt. She considered sitting in the parking lot of the retirement home with him until he agreed to let her fasten it, but then she reminded herself that he was going to die. What did it matter, and how much longer would she need to listen to that bell chiming as she drove her stubborn father places anyway? When she started the car without starting the old argument, she was quite sure she saw in the passenger window the reflection of his smile. He'd won an argument without ever having to have it, an art he'd perfected in the course of his life. When they came to a stop at a red light, Jane turned to look at him, seatbelt warning chiming between them, seatbelt light flashing on the dashboard in front of her, and he was definitely smiling, and he was wearing that jacket and looking like a man in perfect health, as pleased with himself as ever, the same guy who greeted her every morning when she was a teenager by crowing, "Hey there, somebody took her ugly pills again this morning." The same guy who'd unwrapped every Christmas present she'd ever agonized over before buying and set it down on the floor at his feet, never to speak of it again. "What's your problem?" he asked her. In the corner of her eye, Jane saw that the traffic light had turned green, but there were no other drivers around, and they were certainly in no hurry. She made no effort to step on the gas and pass through the intersection. "Huh? What's with you? Forget how to drive? Waiting for the light to turn a little greener? Take too many stupid pills this morning?" Jane didn't swallow. She didn't even take a deep breath. She said, "You're going to die."